Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ron Darvin. I'm with the English Department of CUHK, and I'd like to welcome you to this very brief talk. It's only around 30 minutes, entitled Fighting Fake News, Understanding How Online Disinformation Works. And if you're one of those students in secondary schools here in Hong Kong who've been thinking about, whether you'd want to join the English department here at CHK, we are presenting the series of talks just so that students like you would gain an understanding, right, of what we do here at the English department. And just wanted to introduce myself briefly. So within the English department, as you may have known from Professor Julian Lam when he did this orientation talk a couple of weeks ago, that within the English department, we have two streams, one in English literary studies and another in applied linguistics. And I belong to the applied linguistics group. And as an applied linguist, one of the things I'm particularly interested in is how language works, right, in many different contexts, how it's used by people in many different contexts. And for my particular area of research, I've been, in the past how many years, particularly interested in online communication in terms of digital literacies, looking at social media, understanding how social media is designed and how people use it in different ways and what that means in terms of different emerging online cultures, right? And it's these ideas that I weave into courses that I teach. For English majors at the English department, everyone takes the core courses, English 1310 and 1320, which are your communications courses, which I've decided to weave in many different digital literacies, right, in terms of understanding what it means to communicate not just in academic contexts, but in online contexts. And I also teach several undergrad courses, including 3950 and 3960, which looks at digital literacies as social practice, and also examining digital technologies for language learning, right? So what I'm sharing with you this afternoon is one particular component of the 3960, which I teach, which examines really what it means for us to communicate in the 21st century, recognizing how these many different technologies mediate communication. And particularly at this point of our history, where because of technology, we have all the affordances of communicating to a wider, more diverse group of people. But at the same time, it's because of these affordances that we have encountered a lot of disinformation online, right? And that's why if you think about kind of like even in the past how many months with the pandemic, with all these crazy theories that come out and are shared on social media, for instance, whether 5G causes the coronavirus, right? Or whether you're one of those people who actually believe that the earth is not round and actually just flat, right? Or in the past how many months, in the US particularly, there's been a surge in believers, for instance, in the QAnon, or it's the deep state, where people believe that Democrats like Obama or even celebrities like Oprah Winfrey are actually part of this group that engage in satanic rituals and are going to be, the downfall of this group of people is supposed to be with Trump being able to assert his power, right? So with the rise of all these theories, especially as people come to try to make sense, right? In at this point of our history where we have a pandemic and we're left with a lot of uncertainty, we see a lot of people kind of clinging to many different beliefs, right, to make sense of the world. And this is how fake news really is bred in different ways. And so to start, one of the things that I'd like to ask, of course, is, the very fundamental question: what is fake news, right? Because in the past how many years, right, where you suddenly hear a lot of examples of fake news surfacing, right? It's become a catch-all term for everything from hoaxes to conspiracy theories uh, to different kinds of distorted information, right? And if we look at the very definition of fake news by Laser et al., that it is fabricated information that mimics news media content in form, but not in organizational process or intent. That is, it's news that or information that masquerades as legit news from perhaps as distributed in legitimate news platforms, but with a clear intention to deceive. Now, what's been problematic with the term fake news really is that it's been thrown around by people in so many different ways, right? You have someone like Trump, right, who when he gets a question that he doesn't like or gets news that doesn't align with what it is that he wants to insist on, is something that he would label right away as fake news, right? And so because precisely the term fake news has become this catch-all term, right? I think one of the key things that we need to understand is that clearly fake news is one, it's disinformation, right? As opposed to misinformation, which is just an honest mistake, like journalists may misquote someone or might have, published something in error, but accidentally, right? Then it would be misinformation. But the moment we call something as disinformation, there is a clear intention to deceive, right? And so one of the first things we need to understand then is if the term fake news has been used to refer to so many things, is perhaps we need to be able to clearly identify what makes something fake, right? And that's where labels more specific to the kind of content that we encounter becomes necessary, because it's by identifying more clearly how it is fake news, then we can understand the very purpose of why these fake news have been created, right? So whether it's what we know as a hoax. I don't know if you've ever heard of this 15 Days of Darkness, that every year there's this gets circulated as something that NASA has predicted, and it's clearly fabricated content with the intention to disinform, right? There are, of course, what we recognize as conspiracy theories. And again, Donald Trump, as one of those people, sadly, who promote different conspiracy theories, like the idea that global warming was created by the Chinese, right, to make US manufacturing non-competitive. I don't know if you've ever used this app. It's called Reface. It used to be called Doublecat. It became so popular where you can superimpose your face on on Beyonce's latest music video, right? To become Beyonce. And the technology that you use there is what's known as deep fakes, right? Where you can, through the affordances of facial recognition, you can transplant someone else's face on not just a photo, but videos. And we see that in many forms of doctored content, right? Where because of technology, you can take a politician or any celebrity who has a great number of videos released publicly, right? And where they would have a lot of recordings of their audio, where through the technology, you have this corpora of all their utterances of their speech, that using this technology with a source actor, you can actually tamper with the image, the moving image of this person, and make it appear to say something that you want them to say, right? Because it's able to focus in on the mouth, to be able to let it open and close to match whatever it is you want them to say. It's not any different from when you use those filters on Instagram, right? Where the moment you open your mouth, you can be breathing fire or whatnot, right? And that's part of kind of like how that's part of technology that allows this doctored content to exist. Then, of course, I don't know if you've ever seen this. It came out in Time, which is a fairly reputable source, where they say scientists say smelling farts might prevent cancer, and these are examples of what would be called pseudoscience, right? Where they take something that sounds scientific and they twist it around that it actually communicates something false, right? Of only because it makes it sound a lot more interesting. Then there are those that are not necessarily automatically fake news, right? But may lend itself to to opportunities for fake news to be distributed. So for instance, I don't know if you know RT. RT is a news platform which stands for Russia Today, and it is state-sponsored news, right? And the moment that it is sponsored by the state, by governments, then that means the governments have greater control on what can be said or what cannot be said, right? Of course, there's also I don't know if you, when you go online and you find all these really exciting headlines, right? Like shocking food facts, or how to lose 10 pounds in 5 days, right? And these would be examples of clickbait, where you have sources that use exaggerated or misleading or questionable headlines because it's trying to bait you into clicking on it, right? And of course, there's also what we call native ads or sponsored content. This is an example of a post that appeared in the New York Times, where it talks about how our energy needs are changing. And while I'm not expecting you to read the whole paragraph here, in the end, the very thesis of this post is that that in the end, no matter how energy sources change, we'll always need oil, right? And perhaps it's not surprising that that this is the thesis of this particular article, because if you zoom in on the top, you'll realize that it's actually a paid post, and the one who's paid for that post is Chevron, right? And so it's an example of what would be called a native ad, where you have paid content that matches the form and function of the platform where it appears. But of course, because it is paid for, then whoever publishes it is able to advance their own agenda, right? Uh, then, and of course, you have examples even in the Atlantic, where you have something like sponsored content, right? Now, why do people create fake news? And there are many different reasons. The most obvious, of course, would be for political gain, right? That is, it's a way to sway people, and it was particularly significant, for instance, in the 2016 US elections, where there was a surge of fake news that was circulated, where people were sharing more fake news than real news, right? And when this fake news strike, particularly when there's a particular event and it's new and people are still trying to figure things out, that it becomes easy to promote information which has not yet been proven false, right? So for instance, if you recall the Parkland shooting in Florida a couple of years ago on February 14, and this happened in a school, and students started speaking out about this particular event, about this massacre, and how they believe that the distribution of guns within the U.S. should be controlled. Right away, there's a lot of fake news saying, oh, these students are not real students, that they're actually conspiracy or crisis actors, right? And they were paid to perform, these roles as students, and they're out to go against the agenda of, let's say, the National Rifle Association, which tries to protect the rights of Americans to bear guns, right, to bear arms. Then, of course, there are some examples of fake news that are also meant to be kind of just like a joke, right? This actually, this image of a raccoon riding an alligator was actually reported by the BBC News, right? Only for them to find out later on that these were actually taxidermied animals. They were stuffed animals, right? And they were quick to report it without finding out what it actually was all about. Because in the end, the economy of kind of like news nowadays, where things come up in Twitter so quickly that they would have to respond just as quickly. And so that poses a problem in terms of the process of verification that that big news platforms like the BBC are supposed to conduct, right? And so that eventually was taken down. And if you think about what's happening in the U.S. With the kinds of protests that are happening in places like Portland or Seattle, where there's great division, and one can say that it can be attributed to how in social media there's so much targeted advertising, where it's so easy for groups like, in this case, troll farms situated in St. Petersburg in Russia, which has been investigated in the US for the past couple of years, where they only have to pay $100,000 for 3,000 ads like this to be targeted to specific groups of people in the US with the great intention to sow division among people, right? And so fake news is being weaponized to divide people, right? And that, in fact, right, when Canada, for instance, brought soldiers to Latvia to protect them from any kind of occupation by Russian forces, they had to protect the soldiers from fake news that is in the same way that there was fake news about the German military raping people in Lithuania, so that the locals would not interact with the soldiers when they were there. It was something that the Canadian troops had to also protect themselves from. Right. The one thing that I think is often overlooked, right, when it comes to fake news, is that it's not always political. It's not always born out of a strong conviction to advance a certain agenda. And perhaps this is most obvious if you look at this post, the evidence of what one of the motives that is most apparent in the distribution of fake news is what you find actually on the left. And what is on the left, and I'm not saying it's Lufthansa, it's actually ads, right? Because in the end, the way we need to understand fake news is that it also serves a particular motive of profit, right? That it's not always ideological. Because in the end, every time you click on things, hence clickbait exists, because every time you click on something, that means money in the pockets of those who create this content. And so what happens is that when they realize, for instance, that there's a large group of mostly people on the right, for instance, in the US, who are particularly interested in fake news, you'll see how groups like this, the Liberty Writers, which purports to be news, which turns out to be these two 20-year-old unemployed men in the US who decided to come up with a news platform of their own, where they don't do any research, they just come up with whatever they imagine about Obama or about Trump or about Hillary Clinton. And that they end up getting paid at one point, 40,000 US dollars in a month for the traffic of people who actually go to their site. And it's not necessarily, as I've said, born out of any political conviction, because even in terms of fake news that we distributed, a lot of them have been traced to places like Macedonia, for instance, where you have 16-year-olds, right, who couldn't care less about what's happening in the US, but realize that there is money to be made by manufacturing fake news. Or even some people who come up with sites like Black Lives Matter and try to sell merchandise, even though this particular page on Facebook they discovered was run by a white Australian man who ran off with $100,000 with people ordering stuff in his fake Black Lives Matter webpage on Facebook. So how do we then detect fake news, right? How can we, as readers of this news, where we're bombarded by so much information online, how can we detect fake news, right? And of course, the easy way to answer would say, oh, you know, there are sites where you can verify it. So I don't know if you've heard of Snopes.com or politifact.com, where they actually verify certain news, and you just have to input a specific topic to find out what it is, you know, to what extent these the information that's been provided by certain people are true or false. And I like PolitiFact because it not only says if something is false or mostly false, but if something is pants on fire false, right? But then, of course, there are those that are not as, you know, there are ways of finding out what is fake news, not just by searching for them on Snopes or these online tools, right? So if you were to look at this image, for instance, and very quickly, I'm going to post a poll, right? A question is this real or fake? And I want you to answer very quickly. It won't reveal your names on the screen, so just answer it. It's just an anonymous survey, right? And you'll see how, okay. I'm going to give you 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, and what we have here, oh wow, it's 50-50, right? In terms of people saying this is real, this is fake. And I bring this up, and I wanted to showcase this because if you think about, you know, when we learn kind of what it means to develop critical literacy in terms of understanding if something is fake or not, by default, the question has always been, oh, look to the source, right? And in this case, I don't know if people are familiar with this particular source, The Onion, which is a satirical website, right? But we can see right away that it's so easy because of the affordances of technology to mimic, right, what looks like a legit news site, right? And you would see all these tabs, for instance, like politics or sports, local entertainment, which are your usual tabs. Although you might be surprised if you examine more closely the context of this particular app, this particular article, you would have a tab, for instance, called clickhole, which doesn't really make sense, right? And so while it does look like a scientific piece of news, right? It's by focusing on kind of like the context in which this particular piece is published that we could find clues, right, in terms of what is fake. Let me share another. Oh. There's this particular news that came out a couple of years ago where it was supposed to be kind of like a nuclear attack happening in the UK and how the royal family was evacuated. And it got circulated among hundreds of thousands of people for a while, and there was some panic, only for people to find out, right, that this was taken from a YouTube video, which actually did say, right, that it was a work of fiction, right? Sorry, bear with me a second, right? And did say that this is a work of fiction and it's not happening, and was in fact a video that was created for a particular experiment to see how people would react if they were presented with news in a specific setting, right? But what happened here is that while this particular news was on YouTube with its proper disclaimers as something fake, right, as fiction, someone took that video and shared it within WhatsApp, right? And of course, the moment it gets shared within WhatsApp, where you no longer have the descriptive detail that you would have in the YouTube site, then it's completely abstracted from the context in which it's done, right? And which brings me to kind of like the question of when we look at fake news, right? You could have posts, for instance, that come from legit sources. This, as you can see, is the New York Times video, and it is the New York Times video Twitter account, right? But somebody actually hacked into the New York Times video Twitter account and posted this, right? And so people are kind of confused, because if you've been following the New York Times and you know this was legit, then suddenly you're faced with this. What does that mean then, to say, oh, just look at the source and you'll know if it's real or not? That means, because of the many ways, right, with technology evolving, there's so many different ways for this deception to happen then, that the task of being able to find out if something is fake or not is then dependent on us in terms of how we read these different content. So for instance, if you were to look at this post, right, one thing you might notice is that there's something off, right? The fact that it's from the New York Times, but the sentence does not is not capitalized, right? And in fact, if you are able to recognize the way hashtags are used, right, that there are specific conventions in which hashtags are used in news as opposed to, let's say, on Instagram. On Instagram, after you post your beautiful brunch and you say hashtag bless, hashtag throwback Thursday, etc., you would use this format, but that isn't necessarily the format in which those journalists in the New York Times would use tagging, right? That tagging within news would usually be embedded in the actual caption. So by recognizing how this does not really belong to the convention of journalism and its use of hashtags or tagging, then it's one way for us to be able to detect disinformation, right? Uh, Other examples, and I'll go through this quickly. Uh, you see this in uh, uh, email that you might get where you have email that says, "Oh, dear customer, it's phishing emails," right? Where you said you need to provide us with this information. But if you were to really understand, right, the what makes something legit or not legit, right, then you should be able to recognize that if the issue was particularly with your account, then Visa won't, one, address you just as the generic customer, right? They would, of course, provide you with their real name if they have singled you out as a victim of card fraud, right? And that in sending official email, you will not get sentences that end with exclamation marks, right? Like failure to verify your records will result in card suspension, exclamation mark, as if this was some post from someone's Instagram or Snapchat, right? Uh, the other thing that that we might want to look at also is how the use of other words, right? Like in this case, headlines, where obviously when someone says breaking, they're here with more than e's, with too many e's, for it to be a legit headline, then the language itself signals to you if something is real or not. In this particular post in Injure, where you can take a look at kind of this case, uh, the heading Fukushima nuclear flowers. But if you look at the one who posted it, it doesn't even appear like a legit name, right? It's sending you a message to Google someone, right? If we go to another, right? We know that Queen Elizabeth is pretty much alive, right? But if you look at this, it's coming from BBC News with the appropriate logo, right? And how do we know that this is fake? One, you realize even the logos are so easy to duplicate, right? It's so easy for me to download that logo and add it to Twitter. But if you were to look at the handle, and if you pay particular attention, you'll see, does anyone notice that? It's BBC News UK I, right? And so while BBC News UK is a legit handle of the BBC, BBC News UK I is obviously fake, and that the addition of the I there is very intentional because it's very easy to overlook, right? And we see this happen in many different situations. Whether it's looking at logos, right? Where it's something that purports to be CNN, when in fact, if you look at the logo, that is not the CNN logo. This is the CNN logo, right? And even when you look at this by ABC News, you'll realize that that is not the ABC News logo. This is the ABC News logo. And I don't know if you notice, if you look at the URL, what is particularly interesting there, does anyone notice, right? It's abcnews.com.co, right? And .co, the moment you add .co, that is different from abcnews.com. Because what is .co? .co, so for instance, if you have websites in Hong Kong, it would end with .hk, right? cuhk.edu.hk. In Canada, it's .ca. .co, do you know which country is that is it's represented by CO? It's Colombia. And you don't have to be in Colombia to get the extension .co. You just have to purchase the URL abcnews.com.co. But what is obvious here in terms of the way it wants you to see it is to know that when you see .co, you don't see the extra .co. You just think it's .com, right? And so this happens in many different situations. And the other thing is looking at specific images, right? This is a particular post that came out after the bombings in France several years ago. There was multiple suicide bombers in outside a stadium in France that happened one evening that killed a number of people. And this post was actually this person who was supposed to be one of the brothers, and so they're trying to say that this was one of the extremists, right, the Muslim extremists who participated in that suicide bombing. And it was reported in some major newspapers in Portugal and Spain. But what surfaced really was that it came from this Facebook post by what's supposed to be called the Khilafah News, saying this is one of the brothers that carried out the blessed hashtag Paris attacks. How does this kind of news get distributed? Because through the hashtag Paris attacks, people are then able to search for all the information that's provided real time about the Paris attacks, that people stumbled upon this. And I don't know if you notice what's peculiar about this picture, report saying that this is one of the suicide bombers, is that if he's meant to be a Muslim extremist, that if you look at what he's wearing on top, that is not something that Muslims would wear. That it's actually a dastar that is worn by Sikhs, and that he's supposedly holding the Quran. But if you look at it, then the question is, who's taking that selfie, right? Because where is the camera supposed to be given that angle, right? When I showed this to a couple of students, they were very quick to also point out, look at the outlet there. That outlet is not even a European outlet. That's a North American outlet, right? And as it turns out, this post was actually a doctored content by a gamer in the US who apparently had a little fight with another gamer in Canada. And the way he retaliated was he came up with this image and made him look like he was an extremist, and then uploaded it and added the hashtag Paris attacks. And because of that, it was easily distributed across a number of people, across different countries, that was eventually even taken up by real news platforms. Okay. Now, what is the point that I'd like to make here? That in the end, when we speak of fake news, right, and being able to detect fake news, that in the end, it really is, while we can check sources, while we can make sure that we can use the tools to be able to find out if this is fake or not, that in the end, it really is about being able to examine more closely the words and images that are used in the text. And that today, right, it's not just about looking at the headline, it's not just about looking at the content, it's looking in many different places, whether it's the URL, the Twitter handle, checking who the followers are, and of course, being able to do more lateral reading and searching for information online. And this very process of examining words and images more closely is something, just to bring it back to, what we do here at the English department, especially in the area of applied linguistics, where we try to zero in on how information is distributed how people use language to communicate with one another. And through the process of examining more closely these words and images, we're able to understand if something is created with the intention to deceive and when something is legitimate. And all this, of course, is important for us to be able to apprehend the truth in the 21st century. Okay, that is my talk, my quick 40-minute spiel on fake news and online disinformation. I think we do have some time for some questions, and you can either just post the question on the chat, or you can speak up if you have any questions.
Hi, Ron. Hi, Ron.
Hi, Caitlin. How's it going?
Do you still remember me?
Of
I'm
course.
Caitlin.
Yes.
I'm Caitlin. Yes, miss you so much. Hi. I just want to say thank you because I've just graduated this year, and now I still have the chance to listen to your lecture, and I think it's very good. Yes, thank
Thank
you.
you for that, Caitlin.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ron.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think that the fake news, yes, it's a very interesting topic, and for us, for our life today, we are surrounded by a lot of news, so it's very important for us to distinguish the real news from the fake ones. So I think this is a very useful lecture for me. Yes, thank you,
Thank
Ron.
you for that. Yes.
Thank you.
And to add to that, Caitlin, I think especially uh, when we're facing, in different crises where
Mm-hmm.
right now, where
Yes.
people are trying to grapple with the truth and trying to figure out stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
The more we have to be careful, because there are a lot of false prophets who are trying to feed us information to steer us into different directions, and it has huge implications, right? Whether
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm.
about the value of wearing masks, right? To actually
Mm-hmm.
think that there are still people who think that, that there is no need for wearing masks, or that coronavirus is a hoax, right?
Yes.
People
Yes.
have
Mm-hmm.
been fed information in through different channels that
Mm-hmm.
make them believe, that it's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that actually during the period of COVID-19, there's still a lot of news that there is still a lot of fake news that were created to just I think it's just to attract people's interest and just let them know that oh yeah, that's it. But actually we still need to improve our ability to figure it out, to figure out the real news and the fake news. And I think that this is a very I think that after listening to your lecture, I would find it easier to pick to pick them out, because just now when I noticed the onion, yes, at the first time when I noticed the onion, I know that oh, actually, yeah, it's a fake news. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
Mhm.
Thank you, Caitlin. I
Yeah.
have one question here on the chat by Brenda.
Okay. Okay.
Why
Thank
do so
you.
many people, thanks, Caitlin. Why do so many
Thank
people
you.
like to believe?
Thank you, Ron.
Thanks, Caitlin. Brenda asks, why do so many people like to believe in fake news? I think um, if we were to, apart from what I just mentioned about how in moments of crisis people are trying to grapple with the truth and to figure out reasons for why things happen. If you look at the very infrastructure of social media, for instance, and how uh, uh, while we say social media there is to provide all the information, the internet has all the information we want. But the truth is, the moment we press the like button in social media, the moment we agree with the post of someone, a friend of ours, um, what we're doing is we're training our Facebook or whatever social media platform to recognize what it is that we like, right? And because of that, because the business of social media is to make sure that we keep on coming back, right? And provide us stuff that we like or we agree with, right? And so because of that, if someone shares fake news and you like it, what happens is that your platform is trained right? To recognize that this is the kind of news that you like. And so what happens is that it just keeps on feeding you uh, that kind of information, so that in the end, even though we say, oh, it's connecting everyone, the truth is we're directed to different filter bubbles, as they call it, right? That is, we enter these insulated spaces where we get to only see information that we already agree with, right? And so if we make the mistake of not paying attention to the legitimacy of specific information, then it becomes easier for us to be trapped, right, into this fake news, where you have people who will say, yes, I agree with you. And because of that, because you hear people agree with you, that you begin to believe it is true. And that's not surprising. Let's say the fact that we live in the 21st century, where still there are some people who believe that the earth is actually flat, right? Uh, or those who don't believe in vaccines, or people who say that Oprah Winfrey is part of a satanic group of people, right? Who's after killing your babies, right? That when we like these things and you think, oh, it's so interesting, I want to read up about it. That the moment we go into this space, uh, the the deeper the hole we find ourselves in, because then uh, the insulated space where we receive all this information then becomes kind of like an echo chamber where we hear the same thing over and over until we actually believe it is true. Okay. If there are no more questions, I'd like to thank you for spending the time with me on a Thursday afternoon. And if you have any other questions, you can email me. This is my Twitter handle right here as well. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the day. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Ron. Bye.
Bye. Thanks.